This episode was made possible by our patrons Nora Carpenter, Kim Hokinson, Marie Elaine Kelly, Bree Smith, Robin Brown, Cornelia Weiss, Heather Justin, Janelise Cannon, Jill Harrigan, Maria Sanchez, Valerie Jacobson, Jamie Lang, Heather McKinnon, Michaela Frew, Amanda Gilmore, Monique Harris-Pixato, Sarah Mikado, Natalia Karuska, and Caitlin McTaggart. Thank you so much for being our sponsors. We could not do it without you. You can become a sponsor for as little as $1 a month to help make more episodes happen and to get these episodes ad-free. Hi, Olivia.
Hi, Katie.
I've got a question for you. Pretend I'm a stranger. And listeners, I'm asking you this also. Hello. Very nice to meet you. Where are you from?
I never know how to answer this question.
Aha! Why?
Because I don't feel like I have a place I'm from, I guess. I mean, I have a place I lived mostly as a child, but I don't identify with it very much anymore. I've been out for longer than I was in, and I moved every 2 years most of my adult life, that there wasn't really a place. Now I definitely feel of where I live, but I'm not technically from where I live. I don't have an honest answer to it.
Yeah. Well, I think it teases out so many unconscious notions of identity.
Yeah.
Like in one seemingly simple question, where am I from? Or where do I want to be from?
Yeah.
Or where does my soul feel like it's from?
You can have a very big disconnect with where you were born or raised and what you feel like. My kids would often, when we lived in China and people would ask where we were from, my kids would answer China and get all the side eye, right? Everyone would kind of look at them like,
no, you're not.
No, you're not. Platinum blonde child. But they were from China. That's where they grew up. So
yes. So where are any of us from? And how do we change it? America, in particular, is a land of immigrant stories. And I feel like those kinds of stories get to the heart of roots and longing, leaving the past behind and building something new, all wrapped into one story.
Yeah.
Well, in 2008, Elana Lim from Seattle, Washington, was a chaperone for her son's field trip to a new local museum. On display in this big glass case was a 1910 stock journal, and on it, the names of 170 Chinese men who had purchased 2 large buildings that turned out to be the origin of Chinatown. And as Elana glanced at the list, she saw Art Wing Eng, her grandfather, who died before she was born. And she was like, what on earth? How did I not know this? And that set Elana Lim on a journey. What is the real story of my grandparents? And the China they left behind, and the Seattle that they helped to build. For Elana, it was all the more poignant because up to age 10, she had lived with her grandmother, Ao Shi, in Seattle's Chinatown, in that building that her grandfather had apparently owned.
Wow.
And now Elana Lim has written a memoir, American Chinese, The Past I Inherited, The Future I Chose. And Elana has really gotten me thinking about how many stories are not just ignored or forgotten, as we're very familiar with on this podcast, but so many stories are intentionally buried by the people who lived those stories. Nowadays, we live in a time that preaches, speak your truth. We believe we must talk about things. It's the foundation of our modern psychological universe. But for most of human history, that has not at all been the case. I'd say for 99.9% of our history, the human experience has been just as much about what you don't talk about as what you do. So, Elana Lim's journey into the story of Ao Shee, her grandmother, was a journey into unspoken stories. And the building where she was raised is now a museum, the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle.
That's awesome.
For 60 years, Ao Shee was matriarch of the building that is now the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle. So, let's go to the museum together.
Hooray!
We'll explore the uncannily relevant issue of birthright citizenship and also the age-old practice of surviving by staying silent, and the act that was, in the past, considered noble, taking family secrets with you to the grave. I'm Katie Nelson.
And I'm Olivia Mickle.
And this is What's Her Name?
Fascinating women you've never heard of.
Great, yes. So my name is Elana Eng Lim, and I am a second-generation American Chinese. My parents were born here in Seattle, Washington, and my grandmother, who's the subject of today, Shee Eng, came to America in 1920. I'm in the midst of writing a book. It started as something different. It was going to be sweet little stories about growing up in Chinatown, and the research just kept coming, and Chinese Exclusion Act files at the Federal Archives. And it's almost like we've come full circle today, and the book is a little different now. It's really focusing on my grandmother and my mother and myself, and how the historical laws still impact us today. And I didn't realize what the connections were until I started doing research and started writing. Yeah, it's fascinating. It is very fascinating.
Elana Lim was raised in a matriarchy, and her grandmother, Ao Shee, was the queen, but she never knew it at the time.
At the time, I didn't realize I was in a community of matriarchs. But I realize now that that's where they gathered for mahjong, and all through the year, whether it was rainy or sunny, you'd have women coming in and out of her apartment. So we really grew up with the community. And this is where we lived. My grandmother immigrated in 1920, and she lived here for 60 years, raised 8 of her children. They lived 10 people in a 500 square foot space. So that's her kitchen and her bedroom. There's this little copper bar with a chain through it because when she was 70, she fell and broke her leg. And boy, but at 70, she was not going to give up. So my dad jerry-rigged this bar above her bed, and she got strong enough to be able to pull herself up and out of bed and still would hobble into the kitchen to cook. Wow. So these are pieces from her space. It's crazy that this lamp table is actually a lamp table we found in my uncle's house when he passed away. And I was like, we have to put that back in the museum. So, amazing. Yeah, so there are items in here. This blanket here is something that she made for me for my sweet 16th birthday. So it just felt like it needed to be here. Oh. Yeah. And living right in the middle of Chinatown. So this space, her space, was a ground level apartment. And the door was open all summer long, and you could hear the television playing, and she loved soap operas. And what I remember most is a green recliner that sat in her space, and so we found a replica She used to sit and crochet and knit and read stories. She liked magazines and books, and she was one of the few women that read Chinese. Oh, yes, there it is, the green recliner.
Oh my gosh, there it is.
Yeah, so that's my grandmother and myself and my little brother in 507.
It was so cool. She walks us through the apartment where they lived, and there's so many great like little details. Here's
Is it kept like a tenement museum or something?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. And the apartment is furnished, and Elana Lim helped furnish it.
Cool.
Photos on the wall and everything.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you have a sovereign elderly matriarch, it's sometimes hard to imagine her as a young woman, especially if she never speaks of it. But Ao Shee's first 20 years must have been eventful, for lack of a better word. She was born in Sunboi district in Taishan. It used to be called Canton. Now that area is called Guangzhou in southern China around 1900. We learned a little bit about this part of China at this exact same time, around the year 1900, in our episode, The Sworn Spinster, Fanny Law. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Some girls in the area were going into factories and they were starting to form a kind of working class feminist consciousness. You remember?
Yeah. Awesome.
Like inventing a new way of living as a sworn spinster so they wouldn't become hungry ghosts. But remember how the guest in that episode, Teresa Lim, said, you were blighted if you had a girl.
Yeah.
So, safe to assume that Ao Shee was a blight. And so as she grows up, Ao Shee has two possibilities in life. Either she'll go into the factories, or she might provide an income of sorts in the form of a bride price when her parents married her off.
Yeah.
They opted to marry her off. And it appears her family may have used a matchmaking service and sent her photo to America.
This is, I believe, her matchmaking photo.
Oh, wow.
So,
with a dog.
yeah. And I know nothing about this. This is a photo that was in that box, no explanations.
And because of that photo, her destiny would unfold in Seattle, Washington, instead of Sunboi, China.
Wow.
By age 20, when this match is made, Ao Shee had lived through the Boxer Rebellion, the Sino-Japanese War, the downfall of the Chinese emperor, the ensuing Civil War. I mean, virtually all the most bloody and horrific
the worst
stuff.
Time to live in China.
China is in turmoil. Guaranteed horrors were witnessed before she left. And then this fateful day in 1920, her fate just drastically changes. Art Wing Eng, who works as a labor broker in Seattle, Washington, saw her photo. He came all the way to China to marry her. They had a traditional Chinese wedding ceremony. And now she's on a boat to America. Ao Shee never spoke about any of it. But she did do one remarkable thing. She always kept a photo of her mother-in-law hanging on the wall in a place of honor.
This photo, this is my grandfather's mother. And my grandmother didn't talk about China. Everything was very secretive, down low, and I didn't really understand that growing up. But when I did ask her, who is that? She said, that's your grandfather's mother. And that's really all she said about it. But what was significant to me as an adult is that really is the only thing that connects us to China. She's sitting in a chair and she has bound feet. My grandmother kept it hanging. Even my grandfather's picture was hidden back here in the cupboard, but this picture hung front and center.
Wow, that says a lot.
It does. Yeah. It does, that connection.
So, she sailed across the Pacific in 1920. And of course, we know from our episode, The Paper Daughter, How Jew, that U.S. immigration laws were racist. The Chinese Exclusion Act, passed in 1882, banned Chinese people from entering the U.S. until the law was repealed in 1943. The exception was you can enter if you are a son, daughter, or wife of a man who was already a U.S. citizen, like he had immigrated before the Exclusion Act.
Yeah.
So, immigration officials detained and questioned everyone who arrived to assess the legitimacy of their claims. Elana Lim wrote a vivid article about it for Seattle Histories, and I want to read a part of it for us. Excerpts from My Grandmother's Hand by Elana Lim. On November 9th, 1920, Art Wing and Shee Eng sailed in steerage with 600 other passengers from Hong Kong. I imagine seeing them when they disembark at Vancouver, Shee carrying her own bamboo suitcase down one gangplank and up another for the last leg of their journey to America. What did she make of the Princess Adelaide, a steamship with its 118 staterooms, hot and cold running water, heating, electric lamps, and glass windows? When she and my grandfather landed in Seattle on November 30th, they were immediately separated. My grandmother was detained and held for 24 days, the standard protocol under the Chinese Exclusion Act. As I read and reread the 44 pages in the file written by strangers about the grandmother I had known so intimately, my fingers trembled. It was as if the typewritten words carried my grandmother's breath and her tender voice, the girl Shee had been becoming increasingly present. 9 pages had been withheld, replaced with sheets of paper, blank except for a code explaining that redactions were meant to protect the personal and official information of the subject and her immigration handler. I wondered what was left out and why such protections were still necessary 100 years after the fact. 2 days after arriving, Shee was diagnosed with hookworm, and on December 2nd, her entry was rejected, but she was treated and retested over the next 21 days, probably because my grandfather, Art, agreed to pay for her board and medicine. Included with Shee's Chinese responses to her interrogation is the English translation. The inspector, certainly a white man from the Special Board of Inquiry, described her as 20 years old, 5'1", double pierce both ears, brown spot right temple, large scar across forehead to left center, 2 brown spots right jaw. The black and white immigration photo reveals the fresh bud of my grandmother as a young woman. Her hair is not styled in the tight curls I brushed as a child, but pulled back slick against her head. A gradient shadow highlights a girlish prettiness I never knew. Her eyes penetrate as if she is staring down the photographer, and also me. She taught me that gaze when we played 5-card stud. Gao Nan, she would say, poker face. I was raised on her Gao Nan. Imagine this young woman in an examination room, standing alone, wrapped in the captor's gown, not understanding the language. Did the inspector see a person or a chink? Double pierce both ears, brown spot right temple are undetectable in the photo. How close did his eyes get to the large scar across forehead? Could she feel his breath? Were his fingers respectful, or did he manipulate her jaw as if he were assessing an animal at a county fair? 2 brown spots right jaw. As I read those single-spaced Xeroxes, tears on my cheeks. The grandmother I adored, the majestic woman who always protected me, reduced to courier type. What are your names? I am of the Au family. She was 18 when her marriage was arranged in the customary way to a man twice her age. She's 20 now. There is an older brother who works in a rice field in the village. Her mother is alive and her father is dead. Ao Shee tells the interrogator that her husband is a widower, but I would learn, a family secret. Art's first wife lived to be 54, did not die until 1940 in the family village, 20 years after Ao Shee gave this answer to the interrogator. Did she know the truth? On her wedding day, she was delivered by a go-between in a sedan chair to Art's house in Canton City. At the ceremony, done the old Chinese way, she meets her husband for the first time. How does it come that your husband, being quite Americanized, did not have the white man's ceremony performed? Pressed the interrogator. Rather than telling him that she preferred to marry wearing red, the color of celebration and good fortune, rather than white, the color of death and funerals, Ao Shee says, "I don't know," an answer that will not offend. "How much did this man pay your mother for you?" he then asks. She answers again, "I don't know." These interviews took hours, and questions were repeated over and over to catch you in a trivial lie. If I had been interviewing Ao Shee, I would have asked her the question I never learned the answer to. How did you come to read Chinese? The interrogator did not ask this. On the ship manifest of alien passengers, she'd been labeled illiterate. And I have questions I would ask him. Was she allowed a trip to the bathroom? A glass of water? My grandmother had smoked since she was 12, so she must have craved a cigarette, her head pounding from answering the same questions again and again. "What is your object in coming to the United States?" the interviewer finally asked. "Coming to live with my husband and keep house for him," Ao Shee replied. "The case seems regular in all respects," the interviewer concluded. "With this exception, the applicant is possibly a concubine, the first wife having died, so it is claimed, some 2 years ago in the home village, and Arc Wing marrying the applicant a few years later." On Christmas Eve 1920, Art returned to 1st and Union Street to fetch Ao Shee, who is scheduled to be released from detention. After the door of the immigration building shuts behind them, I see Ao Shee in Chinese clothes, following behind her husband along 1st Avenue, again carrying her bamboo suitcase. She takes in the alien sights and sounds of a trolley rolling down the track, Model T Fords rumbling along the brick-paved street, and gas streetlights, beneath them Christmas carolers singing. She does not understand the chatter of holiday travelers leaving the King Street train station. I so want someone to smile at her and wish her a Merry Christmas. When she and Art stop outside the doors of the East Kong Yik, she looks back down the hill. The train station and the clock tower seem much further away than the 4 blocks she's just climbed. I imagine she is excited but a little scared at being 6,000 miles away from the only home she's ever known. From now on, she decides, she will look forward and not back. I know that about her. I cannot emphasize enough that Grandma Ao Shee never spoke of her childhood, her history, or her journey to America with me or anyone else. She kept her family secrets. She knew, for instance, that her husband, my grandfather, was a paper son. Grandma lived her entire life within a white ghost world of dread and fear created by the Page and the Chinese Exclusion Acts, even after their repeal decades later. Her children and other American Chinese adults of my parents' generation still conceal family stories of expulsion, sudden imprisonment, bullying, everyday racism, and the identities of paper sons.
So my grandmother comes in 1920. This is the environment in which she enters, and she lives in 507 her whole life for 61 years.
For the next 20 years, 1921 to 1941, her life was motherhood. She gave birth 15 times in 20 years. And while she's building a family, she's also building a community of women around her. The buildings are becoming the heart of a booming Chinatown. Here's something I learned at the museum that I didn't know before. Did you know that Taishanese, not Cantonese or Mandarin, was the language spoken in Chinatowns all over the world?
Yeah.
Like Australia, like everywhere. They're speaking Taishanese because nearly all Chinese immigrants were leaving from the same small district of Taishan in southern China. It was called Canton.
Yeah, that's wild.
I did not know that.
This is Canton Alley behind us, and it's a nod to the town that most people immigrated from.
And this immigration circled back and had a huge effect on Taishan because folks sent money back home. So Taishan has this economic boom like nowhere else, which is why that area now is the economic heart of industrial China.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's a port town, and it's the most traumatizing place to live.
Yes. And everybody left. Amazing. But then they retained those connections, and it changed the economics of the world.
Yeah.
These are the bedrooms, and this is a typical bedroom size. Similar size to the bedroom I grew up in. My brother and I slept in the same room. And these beadboard partitions, so there's not actual walls. You see, there's opening on the top, and that was the same for our space as well. So I could hear all the conversations between my mom and dad, and then when my uncles came and stayed, and they could hear our conversations. And the rent was affordable as an immigrant family. So my grandmother was paying, oh gosh, I'm not remembering. Was it $20? Yeah, it was $20. And then by the time she died in 1980, it had gone to $35 a month. I know, yeah. The Chinese were not allowed to live anywhere else. They were relegated to very specific areas, and this is one of them. And I've got a map that I can show you. It was 1920s, they had redlining. So here's a redlining map of the Seattle area, and it gives you the grades. Red is hazardous. And then there's, it's still desirable is green, and best is blue, which is all the waterfront. And yellow is definitely declining.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? So this is an actual map. And what goes along with this map is the racial map.
Oh.
So you have Seattle, and it shows Negroes, quote, Jewish, quote, Orientals, and quote, Italians, all in this area. So now if you overlay, gee, look at that.
Look at that.
So the hazardous areas were informational for banks to give loans. And so hazardous areas, the loans were higher interest rates, pay back in a shorter period of time, and the appraisals of the buildings in those areas generally were lower.
Through all these years of bearing children, insane things are happening across the whole Asian continent. And Shee and all the women in her circle are receiving letters from China, which Shee is reading aloud to them. And the news gets more and more unbelievable. First, the news is Japan has invaded Manchuria.
Yeah.
Rumor has it things are brutal up there. Now Japan is pushing south. There's this rising star named Mao Zedong. He's starting a political rift. And really, it's like, who can stand up to Japan? The nationalists or the communists in China? Who could better defend us? Well, neither, it seems, with the rape of Nanking, which really could only be described as evil.
Yeah.
Then Japan takes Burma, and then unbelievably Singapore and the Philippines. I mean, the war crimes are unimaginable. Yeah. And they're all hearing about this from afar through letters from family members. She knows everyone's story, and she becomes the anchor of a matriarchy. She knows everyone's secrets.
Yeah.
And she doesn't tell.
This is a mahjong table, and my grandmother would host mahjong Mondays and in apartment 507. In the 1920s to 1970s was a woman, her name was Toipoa, or I knew her as Toipoa. She was a mahjong partner of my grandmother. Toipoa would walk up Canton Alley and around the corner and go and hang out at my grandma's place and fall asleep in the green recliner, and they would just sit and smoke cigarettes and tell stories, and other people would come in and out. And then in here, this is the bathtub closet. I remember my grandmother in harvest time, there's this ritual of folding tea leaves or bamboo leaves and filling them with rice and meat and vegetables. And before you use those bamboo leaves, you have to clean them. So Toipoa had done this scrubbing for my grandmother, and I remember just seeing her in here. She was probably no more than 5 foot tall, so it was perfect size. But she could get in there and scrub the bamboo leaves, and my grandmother would go down to the farmer's truck and buy pigeons and snap their little necks and use a tub table to defeather them.
I think it's like a big water basin for all purposes.
Exactly.
Shee watches Days of Our Lives religiously. For non-Americans, this is a long-running daytime soap opera, very melodrama, very sort of quintessential American,
Yeah, it's
I feel
the American soap opera.
Yeah. She also has a room packed with herbs and tinctures and teas because she is a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine.
So she practiced Chinese medicine just on her own, and some of these items were from her cupboard, and so we put them in there. Oh, cool. I had aunts and uncles who were like, so you're doing this exhibit? I've got this stuff, I don't know what to do with it. And it's like, let's put it in the exhibit. This one is funny. I think, can you read that? I don't have my reading glasses.
Kubeb paste, an infallible remedy for gonorrhea.
Yeah. I know, yeah.
Is it mercury?
I have no idea. A little afraid to, Infallible. All the jars of things. I think all the older Chinese women would just collect these jars and reuse them, and my grandmother would keep them in our basement, and there would be things in here that she used to cook soups and teas and for every season. She would go down in the basement to get her jars of ingredients and put them all together, and I would drink the soup. It was awful tasting, and I was sure never to look in the bottom of the pot afterward because I didn't really want to know. But sometimes there were like beetles and salt and antlers and just all different kinds of things.
But meanwhile, the immigrant experience is never just looking back at your country of origin. It's also leaning into the new world that you are building.
Yeah.
And all of this, I think, is perfectly encapsulated in the fact that in Seattle's Chinatown, the midwives, the strong, capable, like heart center of the female community, are Japanese.
Wow. Cool.
Shee gave birth to 15 children in 20 years. 10 of them lived, 5 died in childhood from sickness and illness. Back then, in 1910s and 20s and 30s, the Chinese and Japanese were not able to go to the hospitals. In King County in 1920, there were 60 licensed midwives 40 of those 60 were Japanese. So what was amazing, I loved this. I'm reading this book, and there's a picture of the midwife that delivered my father.
Wow.
So she's in here.
Cool.
Isn't that cool? And what's cool is if you look at any of the birth certificates of other people in that era, they were brought into this world by one of the midwives in this book.
Oh, wow.
So that was really cool to find.
Gosh. And then Japan invades China.
Right.
And over here in America,
They're helping each other out. Absolutely.
Within Chinatown, all of these immigrants, their countries of origin, are trapped in a hateful, horrific war. They're coming to Chinatown, then they're looking across the Pacific and going, oh my, like, I can't even imagine all the feelings. How do they navigate all of that?
Yeah, isn't
Wild ride.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I can't imagine. I don't know how, but you know, from a survival standpoint, I think at some point it doesn't matter. It can't matter. I need help, and so the support among the women, I think, is amazing. Also, that the communities could come together. Of the 10 children that survived, 2 daughters were given up for adoption. And through the process of recreating this space, we actually met the 2 daughters through 23andMe and all the different ways that people could connect. So we've included the 2 daughters there, and yeah, so they're all back together, and then the families got to meet. Yeah. So that was amazing.
Then the attack on Pearl Harbor. America is entering this war. What is going to happen next?
Within the House there is applause, all American applause. No partisanship now. A solidly unified Congress listens to the President of the United States.
No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
Probably no one expected that FDR would make this executive order in 1942 that all Americans of Japanese descent who live in the western coastal states must be immediately interned. So they would have witnessed it. All the midwives packed up, have to walk away from their property, from their homes, get on a bus, gone. Whether coincidence or not, I don't know, that was when Ao Shi's birthing years ended. Now Seattle becomes a major military port, and some of her own sons join up. This is their chance to fight for their country, America, prove their loyalty.
Not really a coincidence that this is when the Chinese Exclusion Act ends, because suddenly, oh wait, no, we're on the other side of this now.
Yes, very good point.
This photo, she had it beneath her clock in the living room so that anytime anyone looked at the clock, they would see this photo. And to me, this is her declaration that we were American, because my Uncle Lincoln, he's the oldest. He was an Episcopalian priest. This is my father, his name is Wallace, and his nickname is Pudgy, and he served in the army in Germany. Next, Uncle Jingo, he worked as a draftsman at Boeing. And then the youngest is Butchie, Uncle Butchie, and he served in Korea. And this is Uncle Larry, and he also served. And what I realized when we were putting the exhibit together, I grew up with this photo my whole life, and it never occurred to me that there was no photo of the women. And you just start to, you think, like, I never felt like my grandmother was, you know, anti-women or not supportive of me, but at the same time, that's kind of telling that the picture of the men was up and not of the women.
American Chinatowns preserved 1920s China. China changed and changed dramatically. But Chinatown remained, in many ways, a time capsule. After the war, again, more wild news from China. It's now locked in a brutal civil war. Mao Zedong and his communist movement against the nationalists.
Yeah.
I mean, what events to witness from afar in the form of letters from family members who were in the thick of it.
And really the only way that non-Chinese Americans are getting this information is through, Helen Foster Snow writing articles to try to explain what's going on for Americans. And
Yes, the gung-ho original.
the gung-ho original.
Surprising everyone, the communists won. The nationalists retreated to Taiwan. And China is rewriting its whole existence. This is the era when it became a standard thing for American mothers to say to their children at dinner, there are starving people in China. Yeah. Eat your meatloaf.
Yep. While the Chinese children are being told there's starving children in America.
In America, yes. In hindsight, we can see 20 million people starved to death.
Yeah.
My grandfather died in 1952. And so here's this photo was taken 1954. And now this is like the first wave of grandchildren. There's 10.
What a great photo.
Yeah. But this is a revelation also for the book that I didn't realize I was really raised in a matriarchal community because all the men were gone. And so it never occurred to me that I shouldn't go to college or I shouldn't play basketball in high school or I shouldn't, I wasn't taught that, or that I shouldn't study math and science. I was good at math and science.
In 1952, just as the communist scare is kicking off in America, one of Aoshi's sons was actually hauled before these. It's almost like witch trials. He was hauled before the courts to say, like, you have these ties to China. How do we know you're not a secret communist? And he's like, because I fought in the war for America. But he still had to answer for his beliefs.
Yeah.
I wanted to show, this is my grandmother in front of 507 with me and my brother Chris. And this is the 60s. And now this is me on a trike. And if you look in the background, this is what it was. It was all a neighborhood.
1960s America was its whole own brand of madness. But 1960s China was in the throes of the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah.
Again, that must have been insane to hear about through people's letters.
What you're hearing, because speaking of what you don't say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like what letters are actually making it out of China and what are they actually finding out?
What are you saying in those letters? You're not taking the risk of saying anything.
You're not saying it's insane.
You're
over
saying,
here.
What a great idea. This is all going super well. We are all huge fans of everything that is happening.
We're so glad that roving mobs of teenagers are beating up their grandparents in the streets. Surely this is a good thing, smashing the old with a righteous fervor. We're so glad they burned down all the old buildings and wrecked everything that represents past China.
Yay!
Yes. Whatever they did manage to say in those letters, I mean, Aoshi knew everyone's stories. Elana Lim actually remembers, she was very young, so she didn't put two and two together until later, but she remembers one woman who stoically listened to a letter that Aoshi read her, and then she went home and committed suicide. Meanwhile, Seattle's Chinatown is this liminal land. it's part China, it's part America.
Yeah.
Starting in the 1960s, people were moving out. It was starting to fall into disrepair. And Wing Luke, a local politician, launched a movement to preserve Chinatown because there was such a fear that this culture and its rhythms would be lost. I mean, Taishanese is now considered an endangered language.
Yeah. There
Fascinating.
are more Taishanese speakers in the U.S. probably
Abroad, yes.
than in China.
They brought the Chinese culture that existed at that time with them. But China changed. They became communists. So there really isn't this version of 1920 Chinese culture in China anymore. So we kind of have this vacuum here, and this building is a testament to that.
I was once speaking to a group about Ogden history, where I live, and I had this map. I was showing them, like, here's what it was like back in the railroad heyday. You had Little Holland, here's Chinatown, here's Little Japan, here's Little Italy, you know, and now, of course, it's nothing like that. And afterwards, a woman came up to me and said, you know, she was sort of sad to lose that. And she said, what happened to all that diversity? And I said, actually, I think we just mixed together.
Yeah, it got
it
stirred.
We stopped segregating ourselves, and we became a new kind of diversity. We're no longer separate people. We are all integrated people. And so we want to preserve the past, but we also don't want to live in segregated areas, right? We don't want to lose Chinatown, but also, do we want there to be Chinatowns in America? And we don't want to freeze our culture in the past also.
Yeah, it's that thing we've talked about where we freeze other cultures at point of contact and say that was what was authentic.
Yeah.
It's nonsense.
And I totally get the tension, though, because we do want to honor and preserve the past. We want to remember
absolutely
what happened and how it was. But also, that doesn't mean we stay there. So maybe the best thing to do is to take a building in Chinatown and turn it into the Wing Luke Museum and tell all the stories, but not live there, not live in that way of life anymore.
So having, I don't know if you find this too with your own kids, having my own kids, they're so far removed from this. This means really, at first when I told them I was writing a book, one of them said, "You're not going to make me read it, are you?" And the whole discussion of Chinese American versus an American Chinese, and that's actually how I got to the title, because my boys were like, "I'm American. Like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. The only thing that I can relate to about being Chinese is I can use chopsticks, and I like New Year's because that's when you give me money in red paper, in a red envelope, right?" It's like, that's their extent of being Chinese. And I was thinking, in a way, that's kind of what we wanted, isn't it? Like, we want to be in America. We want to live free like everybody else, right?
How much do we hang on to the past? And at what point does one become from a place?
Yeah.
Is it always only where you were born? Is it where your grandparents were born? Is it where you choose to live? Is it the language you speak, or the holidays you celebrate, or the religion you practice? What is it that makes you a certain identity?
Yeah.
While we were in Italy, just last month, Italy was making this decision about who gets to be an Italian citizen. And of course, Ireland is having such an interesting moment right now where for the first time this year, there are more Americans moving to Ireland than Irish moving to America. It's like this amazing, like, history
Claiming
turning back on
citizenship
itself
through their grandparents.
Yes, and then you have Irish people going like, "No, you can't come here and be Irish." Oh, wait. It's so interesting. The question of birthright citizenship is before the Supreme Court right now. And that is not some intellectual exercise. You know, it has real implications.
Well, and the precedent-setting case that established birthright citizenship really does mean everyone is the child of a Chinese immigrant who was being denied citizenship based on their Chineseness. I mean, we have literally ruled on this exact question.
So relevant. So it's not just America, but it is, and I think it's not just a political crisis of today. It's one of the fundamental, recurring, eternal questions of humanity.
Yeah.
My mom and my father were born in America, and by birthright citizenship, they're automatically American citizens. But that's one of the things that's being put out there now in the Supreme Court to question. It's interesting, my mom is 86 this year. She was alive during the Exclusion Act and during the internment of Japanese. And she is saying she's, in the last few months, she's never felt this kind of fear since then. And she's feeling the same kind of fear that she grew up with as a little girl, and watching her neighbors, Japanese neighbors, lose everything, just disappearing one day, being taken away. So she doesn't want me to publish. Oh. And she's very afraid, not only for herself, but for me. I always, growing up, you know, they keep your head down, don't make waves, don't call attention to yourself. And I really didn't understand it. And now I do. And now I feel the fear that they feel. And I'm proposing that I was given this opportunity to live in a free country where I could speak. And so I feel responsible to tell these stories so that they are out there. And I was fortunate enough to benefit from being raised by my grandmother and my parents. So I worked at IBM in high tech, and eventually Oracle, and then Microsoft. So it seems really important that I speak about the laws that have impacted us and continue to.
But here's the poignant final chapter. In 1981, Ao Shee was on her deathbed. She was very ill. She'd been admitted to the hospital. Things were looking really bad. Her family was gathered around her. They were like, this is it. But Ao Shee wanted to go home to die. And the hospital wouldn't release her. So they said, we can't release her unless she's showing signs of improvement, if she's speaking to people, if she's eating, you know. And so when Elana Lim told her, like, no, Grandma, you can't go home because you're not improving, she actively rallied and behaved very nicely to the nurses and ate and put on the perfect act that she was improving so that they would release her so she could go home to die. Wow. So she knows she's on her deathbed. She's very intentionally on her deathbed at home. And in those final hours, Ao Shee pulled her son aside and told him she wanted a different name on her gravestone. Not Ao Shee Eng, but Quan He.
And it's a name that nobody had ever heard. Her kids, nobody knew. So my dad did it, and his brothers and sisters are asking him, well, whose name is that? Why is that the name? And he said, she told me to put it on there. And they're like, why? And he said, I don't ask why. Mom says do something, I do it. So he did. And I was 20 at the time that she died, so didn't think much about it. Well, so in 2008, I get her Chinese Exclusion Act file, and I find this document, and it says her maiden name is Quan He. So in death, she declared that she wanted her maiden name on her tombstone.
Whoa.
And under that name, she lies in eternal rest. An untold story, an unrecorded identity, reclaimed as her final act on this earth.
She was a force, and I didn't realize what a force until after, in looking back. The thing that I want to remember is like we're all, like we have a shelf life. We're only here for a certain period of time. But if we can offer kindness and memories of kindness to other people, I just think the world would be a better place. And that sounds so Pollyanna, but really, when I was out there collecting the stories, you would hear a story about, oh, I remember your grandma. She did this for me. So if we can do that for each other, wouldn't that be something?
Special thanks to Elana Lim for bringing us the story of Shee Eng, Kwan Hei, and to Don D. at the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle for making this all happen. I highly recommend a visit to the Wing Luke Museum next time you're in or near Seattle, not just to visit, but for tons of community programming they're doing year-round. Check the show notes for a link to Elana Lim's website where you can learn more about her book and see a gallery of family photos, including the redlining maps of Seattle. As always, check out the tours section of our website to find out where we're going next on our women's history adventures. Come and join us. Thank you so much for donating. Thanks for listening.